Hi, I'm Nathaniel Brooks, and I'm running for Juneau Assembly. Today we're going to review a video of the recent Assembly meeting of the Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. They're responsible for things in the city charter like Title 49, which has to do with land use, and Title 53, which has to do with land acquisition and disposal. So let's get into it and see what the agenda topics are.
Agenda topics. Mr. Bladorn, agenda topic 2.
Thank you, Chair Bryson. So the first topic of this evening is the 2023 foreclosure property disposal. So in your packet, you've received a memo with a suggested recommendation for a motion and a bunch of photos of the property that's located at 526th Street, and that's the one that has the structure on it. And so at this point in time, staff are looking for some direction from the committee to move these forward through disposal. We've had conversations internally with city staff and other departments to ensure that there is no public need to retain these. And so at this point in time, we're looking for a motion from the committee to direct the city attorney to draft and introduce ordinances that authorize the disposal of these properties because of delinquent property tax. And I'll gladly answer any questions.
The properties they're discussing, he said the address a little quick, but it's 5206th Street. And the other lot, which was briefly mentioned, is a lot out at Thane. They're both delinquent on property tax, so they're being acquired and disposed of. And disposal just means that they're going to be sold to the community. That can be done in a number of ways. Anything from land exchange to a sealed bid, over-the-counter sales or negotiate sales, and any other method that the assembly approves of. They did say that they want to get rid of them quick to reduce the risk and liability on the city, so hopefully we'll see some of those lots come up here soon, available and cheap. Next, they're going to be talking about updating the maps for hazard areas of landslides and avalanches. So let's tune in.
Agenda topic 4, ordinance amending the sensitive area requirements of the land use code related to landslides and avalanches. Mr. Bladorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Director McLean coming up to talk on this topic. And I'll note that we also have the city attorney with us online as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the city manager is also going to be joining us as well. But while we may wait for him, I just want to take the opportunity. There he is. Just to clarify for the record, we've had a couple of comments, or at least one from the public, about the notice of recommendation from the Planning Commission. There was a revised notice of recommendation issued. It was dated June 27th, 2023. And I think what has happened is that because this has kind of bounced back and forth between the commission and the assembly levels, that it's in a packet, but it may not have made your packet tonight. So we will make certain that if it stays here, it gets in your next one, or if it moves on to the committee of the whole, that it'll also be included in that one as well, to make sure that you all have it readily available. And if you wouldn't mind, I would just take a moment to read that. So the hearing date was May 23rd, 2023. The Planning Commission at its regular public meeting amended the analysis and findings listed in the attached memorandum dated May 8th, 2023, and recommended the following to the City and Borough Assembly. Do not adopt the director's analysis and findings, and do not adopt the proposed ordinance amending the code related to landslide and avalanche areas, and do not adopt the landslide and avalanche area maps. Consider a method of public notification based on the 1987 adopted hazard maps for affected property owners. That was the fix. In the original NOR, I had made a mistake and it said the Tetra Tech maps. So just to be clear, their recommendation was referencing the 87 adopted hazard maps. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions, and I think the city manager as well, but I think the discussion maybe starts with all of you first and what we can do to help you through this.
Thank you, Director McLean. So that I'm clear, the Planning Commission's recommendation is to leave things as is with the 1987 adopted maps. So the recommendation from the Planning Commission is as business as usual.
That is correct, Mr. Chair, with the one addition of considering a method of public notification.
The new proposed map adds 42 properties that had never been surveyed before according to the 1987 maps, and it drops 16 properties that were included in the 1987 maps. It brings the total from 173 properties from the 1987 maps and would now be 374 properties with the new hazard maps. Christine Mall, the assembly member, asked the Director McLean for the pros and cons if the proposed ordinances and maps were adopted. Let's see what she says.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Who has this one, Mr. Watt or Director McLean?
Mr. Chair, I think it would be useful if the city attorney, Ms. Lane, could kind of start us off on what the obligations are or are not and go from there.
Excellent. Ms. Lane, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear. Did you hear Director McLean's request?
Okay, so I was getting brought over, and so I just missed a big chunk. If the question could be repeated.
Director McLean had requested that you give us our legal requirements for that. We'll go ahead and say it again, Director McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lane, we were speaking to sort of what are CBJ's obligations if we adopt the map or don't adopt the new Tetra Tech maps, and if we only put them out for public information versus adoption.
Thank you. And so I don't know if everyone read the memo that was included in the packet, but there is a 2-page memo that actually gives a good summary of that. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I think it's in the packet. And for the most part, there's the CBJ as a regulator. So there are categories that indicate CBJ is not liable for adopting them or not adopting them, essentially. So it's really up to the assembly what they want to do. The CBJ is not going to be liable for money damages, whether we adopt them or not adopt them. There's some regulatory taking arguments that are fact specific. And then there are Tetra Tech limitations with the map that are included that Tetra Tech puts in there. So it's, Alaska law provides a lot of immunity to the CBJ. So it's really a matter of what the assembly wants to do. Adopt them or not adopt them. There's not going to be a lot of liability associated with that piece of it. So that's probably not like super helpful, but it's a policy call at this point. And you can refer to that memo, and I can provide more information if you have specific questions.
Well, it wasn't exactly clear whether or not she answered the question. It seemed like a very straightforward question, but I'm not entirely sure why the director deferred it to the city attorney and asked for what the scope of their work on the topic was. The assembly member was just looking for simple pros and cons on the proposed ordinances. Let's see what our manager, Roy Watt, has to contribute to the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I think really for the assembly, the question is kind of revolves around how much weight do you want to put on them and how easy do you want to make it for the public to know and understand that the study and maps exist. Municipality from time to time adopts all sorts of plans and studies, and I can think of, a while back we had the Willoughby District Plan, and the assembly liked a portion, so we adopted a chapter of that plan, but the rest of it was just kind of informational. I think you have a lot of discretion here. If there is some formal adoption, I think the public will perceive that the city is receiving and at least on some level endorsing the ideas and conclusions. If there is some kind of adoption, a party that is not engaged today is more likely to be able to learn that the information exists than if we just receive it and just have it on the shelf. I think there's kind of a sliding scale, and those two concepts to me, I think, are most important. How much weight of importance do you want to put behind receiving, adopting, whatever, and how easy do you want to make it for the public to know and understand that this study and maps were done and created?
The manager's focus appears to be split on weight or pressure of a topic and how easy do you want to make the information available. The language used is very important to pay attention to. It's not supposed to be about how much weight or pressure you want to put behind a topic or how hard you want to push it. It's about representing the issue fairly and in a nonpartisan way and disclosing as much information as possible so that the community can lend their weight on the topic and say whether or not they want to support it. The second part is a little more unsettling. There should never be a discussion about how easy do you want to make information available to the community. It should always be how easy can we make all information more available to the community in the spirit of transparency. He also mentioned perceived endorsement if the maps and ordinances were adopted, or even if just the maps were published and nothing else was adopted. I'm not sure if he's for or against perceived endorsement, because there's a lot of perceived endorsement behind allocating $50,000 to educate the community on something that we already did not endorse. Now back to the video where the director and Assemblymember Bryson give further comments on the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. Ms. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Planning Commission did consider this question, which is why the recommendation specifically says, and please do not adopt the maps. And the reason we ended up going with that kind of strong affirmative language was because we were swayed by the informed public testimony that said adoption of the maps, whether or not you regulate, and lends credence to them in such a way as to, it doesn't really matter about the regulatory part of it. An insurer or a mortgage agent is going to see the maps as adopted by the CBJ, believe that they are endorsed as an adoption would be, it would be fair to interpret an adoption as an endorsement. And then those problems that we were talking about before cascade from that. And so the Planning Commission chose to say, do not adopt the maps. We talked a little bit, that was a big step for us, I think. And we talked a little bit about further recommending to review and or strike the 87 maps as well. We didn't get there in terms of the recommendation, but we certainly did talk about that. And I know that that was part of on the mind of some commissioners. So that essentially the regulation of landslides and avalanches would no longer be, and maps would not be purview of the city.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. That actually would be my next question. How would we, what would be the consequences of eliminating the hazard maps, the 87 adopted hazard maps, and then letting the burden just be on the homeowner and not have the city? As I was reading through this, it made it look like that we could remove those regulations and then let the homeowner be responsible for what they build on their home. Is that the same understanding that you guys have after reading all this?
The mention of endorsement comes up again, and I don't believe disclosing mandatory information is endorsement. I like what Assemblymember Bryson said about letting homeowners assume full burden and do what they want with their property. And I'll show you the section of the charter that has to do with landslides and avalanches, and it's right there between those highlighted marks. And the one large burden or proposed burden to a property owner in one of these areas is they might have to get a conditional use permit if they want to build anything larger than a single family home. If we do away with these ordinances, then maybe we can look at other areas where similar permits hold up people from developing their property, and maybe can address alleviating those as well and streamlining more issues and reducing overhead while allowing people to do what they would like to do with their property.
Don't believe that we should keep the old maps and the old ordinances because they're wrong and they're causing problems. And so I would remove option 1 and option 2, and I would add another option that would basically repeal the repeal everything and then keep option 3, 4, and 5 on the table for discussion for the full assembly. And that was probably way confusing, but I'll stop.
Assembly Member Wall reinforces her stance on the topic, and it's quite the assertion to make by saying that they are wrong and causing issues. Remember how large that section is in the charter that covers the landslides and avalanches, and if the major drawback or burden on any property owner beyond the zoning is the conditional use permit, then you can just address that specifically. And, things like this don't necessarily require doing away with everything completely in every instance. Let's continue.
Ms. Wall, I don't see the difference between your option and option 5 because it does repeal the current maps and current ordinance. So could you explain that to me, what you see as your difference?
My understanding is that option 5 does include adopting things for public information. And although I'm not sure, I'm not saying my opinion, but I feel like there are people out there who don't even want these things out there for public information. And so I don't share that opinion, but I was going to leave that option on the table if there were others who felt like we don't put out this information for the public. Does that make sense, Madam Mayor?
Madam Mayor.
It is unacceptable to not disclose mandatory public information to the community. I will never propose or consider that because in my mind, it's not even an option. I'm about fair representation and transparency on any topic, and I will always hold that standard.
My follow-up question would be, and it wouldn't be for you, is if we don't adopt them for public information, how do we share this information with the public? Because it's obviously a study that we paid for, but we can talk about that at the committee of the whole just fine.
Good job, Mayor. Hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned because there'll be more to come. And remember, accountability breeds responsibility. The assembly is responsible to the people in the community, and if we maintain that accountability, then all future decisions become responsible decisions. Make sure you update your voter registration if you need to, and vote for me if you want your voice heard, upheld, and represented. I will always put the people's interest first. Mail-in voting starts mid-September and in person the first week of October. Till next time, have a good one.